right. Hello. We are here today. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, whenever you're listening. I'm Nicole Harlow, joined by, I'm going to restart that because I hear a bunch of echoes, first of all. So I don't know if one of you guys has us turned up a lot, but I can hear the echo.
Yeah.
That threw me off. I was like, wait, why do I hear myself twice? Okay. All right. Testing. No echo. We're good. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Harlow, and today with my beautiful co-host Dawn Thompson and our guest Jordan Searles. She is a prenatal and postpartum fitness instructor and personal trainer. So I'm really excited to talk about fitness in all aspects of the perinatal journey, whether you're expecting or newly postpartum. I know with myself, I'm on my own journey of finding postpartum fitness and what that looks like now that my son is a year officially, which I know I waited a long time, but Jordan will tell us how soon you can start and what's safe and what's not. So let's get into it. Jordan, if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll get
Sure.
started.
Yeah. So I am a NASM certified personal trainer. That is where my personal training route started. And that was about 3 years ago now. And then my own postpartum experience and my own postpartum journey really inspired me to go and get the specific certification for prenatal and postpartum personal training. And that is something that I think is a little bit overlooked, that a lot of just the general fitness population thinks that a personal trainer knows all of the adaptations, modifications, knows what's best for pregnancy. And in fact, there are definitely specific certifications to really help hone in on that, because speaking from my own personal experience, NASM mentioned a couple of things for pregnancy and postpartum, but it was really just like the main general population kind of certification. So if you had asked me when I was just certified through NASA, I'm like, hey, how do you adapt this workout? Like, I'd get like maybe a couple of things, but that certification and specialization really goes a long way. And it made me really realize that there's so much not really uneducated, but just not enough exposure for prenatal and postpartum exercise, and a lot of myths and a lot of gray areas, and just it's really tough to navigate all that by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with like the prenatal period, because I think what we know is that when the pelvic floor is balanced, birth is easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people just aren't even aware of, or even having the baby in the best position can improve how your birth goes. But beyond that, it's also about reducing discomfort, right?
Mm-hmm. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think because we hear people all the time with major pubic bone pain and things like that especially when they're in their third trimester. And I know that there's things that people can do. So let's start with what are some of the things that moms could be doing in the early stages of pregnancy that could help the longevity of the whole event of pregnancy?
Yeah, I think just the basic place to start is just keep moving, right? Like a lot of new moms that I've talked to, some of them just stopped exercising because they got pregnant, because they were scared of moving, scared of still continuing what they were previously doing, or even just like maybe misguided by their doctor or OBGYN or whoever, and just said like, you can't lift more than 20 pounds now. So I think it's really just like a bigger concept of like, you should continue planned exercise, like moving, something that's different than your daily routine. Just some kind of exercise will go a long way in staying moving and staying active, and not getting stuck in a seated position for a long time, or just stuck in different positions, because that's going to definitely affect pain down the line, right? Putting the hips and pelvic muscles and everything in tight and shortened areas, and just everything's going to be a lot more uncomfortable by not moving and activating those muscles over the course of pregnancy. So that's definitely one of the first places to start. The second place, I would definitely just a couple of modifications that people might want to start, especially in the early, usually like the first trimester or so, usually taking out any kind of like on your belly exercises like Superman's. Usually that's a comfort kind of a thing. Like you understand that you got a baby in there, you really don't want to be putting all of your body weight like lifting. So usually that's the first one to go. And then the other one that is, again, it kind of depends on the person as well, are any kind of loaded twisting activities. The biggest one, like Russian twists, right? So anything that is weighted and having kind of spinal rotation can put a little extra stress on the abdomen and on the abdominal muscles when they are at that stage. They are already starting to grow a little bit. So putting extra stress on that isn't quite the best thing for a growing baby and growing mom.
Well, you mentioned something that I think is really important, right? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there, or misleading information that's like, oh, stop working out when you get pregnant, stop doing everything when you get pregnant. And I've read different things too. Like some people say just continue the same level of, but like don't increase it. Now, I'm curious, what if, and to Dawn's point of like pain and discomfort, like what if I'm not someone who regularly has planned exercise in my life and then I get pregnant? Can I introduce it at that point? Or is it like, oh, that's a no-no? Like just, I want to, for our listeners, I want those who already work out, and have that regimen, or those who don't and want to prevent the pain, to prevent the discomfort, or to just, help their labor and their birth. What would you recommend for those listeners?
They should definitely find some kind of exercise routine that they feel comfortable in. Like one of the biggest things that I recommend as well is, and this goes for just almost anyone exercising or looking to get into exercises, find something that you like, find something that feels good, find something that also makes you happy, right? Because that's going to help you stay the most consistent with it. And then for new moms, it kind of applies in the same way of, maybe it's just introducing walking. Maybe it's just introducing some light body weight strength workouts. Not saying you have to go directly to, deadlifting and squatting and, some of the more intimidating movements for someone that hasn't worked out, but do some body weight squats. You can start to do some planks. You can do some basic push-ups. There's just a little bit of strength training, especially in the early phase, can definitely go a long way as far as pain management and helping keeping the body moving. And also, another big factor and benefit of strength training during pregnancy is also literally keeping up with the physical demands of your body, right? You're going to be gaining, anywhere between 20 to, 60 pounds. It ranges so vastly between women that, you need to have strength to keep that weight up all day, especially depending on your job, right? And being able to hold that belly and support it and everything, like having a strong back, strong glutes, strong hamstrings, all of those muscles on the backside of a pregnant woman are basically, being taxed every day, especially in the third trimester.
Well, and I think about too, I often think back to the olden days, right? And how women functioned in the world. It wasn't necessarily that they had some exercise routine, but daily life was very physical, right? They were harvesting their vegetables, they were cooking their meals, they were, tending their whole community. And there was a lot of up and down, and they were rarely sitting down. And it's and those are the things that I feel like I think about often, like, okay, what did it used to be like before we had all these creature comforts of our cell phones and our couches and our when they were running a home, it was no joke, right? And there was a lot of physical activity all the time. And so what are the things that you could be doing in your lives that replicate that, right? Replicate that sort of, like I think your idea of the squats and stuff is such a big deal. But the other thing I wanted to say too, which I've found this is, and doulas all over the country will tell you, some of my clients that had the most challenging births were often yoga instructors. And I think that's so fascinating. I think yoga can be so great. But I think people who are instructors who are doing it many, many times a day, they're often too tight. Like they're so strong. Their muscles are so strong that it actually prevents their pelvis from relaxing. And I think that's so, I mean, I don't know that there's any research on it or not, but I found that just like anecdotally. And, I know other doulas who have talked about it too. What do you say to that? Like that idea or
I have also heard that too. I've also heard that for gymnasts.
Yes.
The same thing. You would think like the flexibility, you would think, they would, baby would basically just like slide out. But no, I've heard that as well. And I agree. I think that really on the like the gymnast portion of it, I'll focus on that first. And I think it's also because they're in their like end range of motion, which is very much more advanced than most people, right? And they have to be able to hold and be strong in those end ranges of motion of, splits and, shoulder mobility, just everything, right? So those muscles, even in their end range of motion, are extremely strong, right? And they're used to contracting them and holding them, and they're probably extremely good at, like, again, that tension. But over the course of time too, have they ever been taught how to relax their pelvic floor, right? Like you said, like they have a hard time relaxing the hips and relaxing everything else. And I'll attest to that from my own personal experience. Like, I knew of a pelvic floor, like I knew it was a thing, and like there was like, oh, Kegels, and it's like, okay, like that was literally it. And then I exercised throughout my whole pregnancy. I did modifications. I did strength training that I was doing before. I was, just taking the kind of general guidance I was getting from just just like general population of like, here's what you kind of have to modify. But, and like, I kind of heard of a couple people saying like, oh, like you should go to pelvic floor physical therapy. But also, again, my perspective, I was like, well, I'm not like peeing my pants or anything. Like,
Right.
I don't feel anything. Like I was very lucky. I didn't have any pubic bone pain. I didn't have any hip pain. I started to have like a little bit of like upper back shoulder pain towards the end, but like it wasn't anything. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go see a PT. I was just like, I'll just, roll it out on a lacrosse ball on the wall and I'll be fine. But that is something that also can apply to like people with weight training and things like that, is also just the general education of like, yeah, it's great to have like a strong pelvic floor, but being able to like relax also makes a huge difference in whether or not you're gonna have a baby or not. Athletes before they get pregnant do struggle with this too, because they have that overactivity basically.
Yeah. I mean, I've followed several gymnasts, like in what you're saying, on social media when they've been pregnant, because of course, that's what I love. And I've followed them and have seen that. I know at least 3 gymnasts that I follow, they've all ended up with cesareans.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, I mean, ultimately the general population, there's more cesareans than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's still a thing anyways, but I just find it so fascinating. And like I said, I saw it in my yoga instructors and stuff. And so I think there's a balance when we're having this conversation. There's a balance of, there's a potential you could do too much, right? You could be doing too much. And, these regular exercises, if you're thinking about, like, I think squats is probably one of the best exercises. Would you agree that of like specific exercises that pregnant people could do that would help?
For pelvic floor?
I mean, just for
in
for
general.
preparing for birth and stuff, right?
Mhm.
Preparing your body and, you know, and managing carrying this baby, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think also, squats also helping opening up the pelvis, helping up, the different layers basically as well. I also do think too, like RDLs are like, especially if they're, single leg gets a little trickier as belly gets a little bit bigger, right?
I have
But
no idea what an RDL is. So yeah,
so,
I was gonna say,
I'm like, you're talking foreign
yeah,
language to me. Go ahead,
yeah.
try again.
So an RDL is basically think like a deadlift, but instead of starting with the weights at the bottom of the floor, kind of the weights start up at the top. So you're starting like standing up. So it works the backside, so your hamstrings and your glutes. And by adding the single leg portion, it allows for the hips to kind of move a little bit more and add more mobility and help opening up. I believe it's more of the posterior pelvic floor, which is extremely helpful. I feel like a lot of people and a lot of exercises like squats really focus on the front portion of the pelvic floor, whereas like these kind of exercises more help open the posterior a little bit more as well. That's one of the areas, at least from some of the other accounts that I follow and everything, that's usually one of the areas that people have said that has they have trouble connecting to is more of like the posterior pelvic floor muscles and trying to open up that area. So I would say like squats are great, RDLs, deadlifts are great. So RDLs and deadlifts kind of go hand in hand together, and a lot of just glute support, hamstring support, and back support.
I mean, even just getting into a regular routine of walking could have huge benefits, right?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Getting the blood flow moving and cardio for mom is actually great cardio for baby. Now, not saying you should go out and do like a HIIT class or that's definitely, especially as pregnancy goes on, that's going to get a lot harder, but there's so many benefits for cardio and strength training that not only mom gets the benefits but also baby gets the benefits. Like there's higher chances of babies having great cardiac health from strength training and cardio training as well. And
That's
also
interesting. I had never heard that before.
hmm yeah, so it's not like babies getting a workout, but like they feel they get the blood flow and heart rate up, and they also are able to handle the stresses of labor better, because think about it, like working out is a stressor, right? Like your heart rate's going to go up, like your body doesn't know it's exercising. It just knows like this is really hard and now I have to learn to adapt to it. Like it might think, if your body's like being attacked by something, like you're running really fast, like no, I'm just going for a run right now, but your body doesn't know any different. So your body wants to adapt to that, and by in including that stress, it also then like baby understands that, like baby will feel increase in heart rate, increase in blood pressure, just all of the things, and will get almost kind of used to it. And then babies of moms that worked out are able to actually handle the stresses of labor and the increase of heart rate and things like that. They're able to handle it a little bit better too.
Dawn, you're on mute.
Oh yeah.
I coughed, and so then I muted myself and I forgot to unmute. But I think that totally makes sense to me. The thing that I feel like I was going to say that I lost now, of course, was the body secretes hormones, right? So if the body is secreting hormones and as you're exercising, then it makes sense that the baby is also then getting those hormones. And you're right, it's just like when you're going into labor, right? All those same hormones to give the body energy, and all those things happen. So I could see that really makes sense to me. I didn't understand that before, but like it seems logical.
Yeah, and I want to talk about before we head into postpartum, because I think that's a really important, the pre and the post are super important. But I know what you're helping me with, Jordan, is like if you don't have time or motivation or whatever for this elongated planned exercise. I know maybe there's some listeners out there that are, resistant to it. How can they best, still get in those extra movements or help them without saying, okay, at 8 o'clock every morning, I'm going for a walk, or I'm doing this yoga class at night, or whatever it is. Because I'm sure there's first-time moms out there that still have some sort of freedom and schedule, but as a mom of 4, I know that is not always the case.
Yeah, that's really hard. And I get that too. Like, even with my one, I'm like, okay, like I used to be able to be like, all right, 5:30 a.m. Here I am working out. I get my workout in, and then, the rest of my day, whatever. And then now it's like, okay, when can I try to get this in? And then it's like I try, and then, something else happens. It's like, okay, well, now it gets pushed. But what I help moms out with is really, one, the mindset of exercise is, again, it's any kind of planned, I'm going to use that loosely, planned movements that are different than what you do in normal day life. So like you get exercise in the sense of, like, if you're doing laundry, you're doing every day, you're doing dishes, you're cleaning, that's just general, they call it NEAT, okay, non-exercise activity, basically just everyday movements, right? So exercise, what I try to help moms understand is, even if you have to sprinkle it throughout your day, right? It's still exercise, and your body is still going to get benefits from that, as opposed to just being like, well, I can't string together 30 minutes, like, or 20 minutes even. I'm just not going to do it. So still doing, if you do 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes there, and then maybe, even another 5 minutes, like, still that's 15 minutes of exercise that you're still able to get done. Yeah, it looks a little bit different, but it's still a lot better than what you were doing before. And your body is going to notice the difference and get benefits from that, even though you might not feel like you worked out.
Well, and I think, like, even doing things like, kind of messing with your brain and saying, like, okay, when I go to the grocery store today, I'm going to park in the last parking spot and walk, all the way. Like, it's even extra little things like that. I just recently saw a video on TikTok, and this is for, people who have older kids. So it's a little bit different, but it's still kind of a funny idea. She was saying, every time one of your kids calls mom,
Yeah,
do a
I think
squat.
I saw that one too. Yeah.
Squat. And I was like, yes, oh my gosh, like, dude, I'll be squatting all day every time I hear the word mom.
Yeah.
But there's things like that, right? That you can kind of, I don't know, trick yourself with. I don't know if you hate to exercise. There's just some movements that you can do, or activities that you can do to just increase the amount of time you're walking, or the distance that you're walking, and, things like that, right?
Yep. The shopping, the grocery shopping one, I usually, that's another good one too. And always too, like I always say, like, if you can, like, 90% of the time, put the cart back, right? Like, I get if you have, like, your 5 kids hanging on you, and it's like, this is impossible, but like, if you can, then take the extra steps and walk the cart back, right? Then it's more movement, and also I think, like, that's the right thing to do. But yeah, it's just looking at exercise as, what can I do extra for my body today? And, dedicating a couple of minutes, a couple of exercises, even just like, I, from personal experience, like, I wanted to get better at pull-ups during COVID, and we literally put a pull-up bar, I think it was in the bathroom. Yeah, we put a pull-up bar, like the ones that, like, hang on the door. And, like, each time I would go in the bathroom, I would do one pull-up. And then that was it. And then over the course of the day, like, I kept track, and, like, I ended up doing like 15 pull-ups in a day. And I was like, that's much more than I've ever done, like, ever in my life.
Right.
And that just, like, slowly got better. And then when I was able to, string together a bunch of pull-ups together, like, that's how I got there. It's just, like, slow, one at a time. And I didn't have to do them all at once. It was just over the course of the day.
Well, and I think too, if you've got a staircase, go up and down a couple extra times a day,
Yeah.
right? Like, or maybe like, you just play a game with yourself. If you're not somebody who exercises, which there are a lot of people who choose not to or don't or hate it, I hate it. I always appreciate it after I do it, and then I feel amazing. But it's getting there, and I also think motivation. Somebody said I think Nicole, you said something about motivation, and I love Mel Robbins says that motivation is bullshit. Like nobody has motivation, and motivation doesn't come before. It usually comes after you've made the decision, the motivation. And so a lot of times, if you just do it. If I just look at my staircase and I go, okay, right now I'm going to just go up two times instead of once. I'm going to go upstairs anyways, so I'm going to just go up and down a couple times. And I think that doing things like that to just kind of mess with your brain is not a bad idea, really.
And to kind of spin off of that too, I personally, I kind of think like, I think motivation gets you started, right? Like you have a goal, you have like what you want, right? And you have to have like some desire to get there. And then once the motivation of like, I started, yay, like, okay, and now like 2 weeks go by and it's like, okay, like I haven't seen any progress yet. Like that's when it starts to like decline again. And I think that's where like discipline and accountability really comes in. That's where like the mindset of like, no, I need to just go do it. I don't feel like it. I don't want to, but like I need to. I have to. And like having that mindset shift of like, this is what I have to do right now.
Yeah.
And I think
because if you wait to feel like it,
right. I was gonna say there's a lot of shit in pregnancy that we don't really want to do, right? Like but I want to shift to postpartum because I want to that because I think it's harder. I don't want to say it's harder, but I think, after you give birth, whether you gave, birth vaginally or had a C-section, obviously there's recovery times and there's this like, big 6-week milestone that I hate even talking about because it doesn't make sense and it's all insurance like driven. But let's talk about, recovery and like what are some like signs that you should start doing exercise again, or what kind of movements can you do, even right after you give birth, anything like that. I would love to.
And let's start with just the whole like bouncing back, getting your body back and blah, blah, blah. It's so bad. It's so awful.
Yeah.
And let's just start there.
Yeah. We could have like I think an entire podcast about that.
Yeah, I agree.
So let me start with just kind of where to start. You just had a baby. Definitely there are some just kind of, it's again like reframing like exercises, and it's really again like stretching and like moving through stretches like is in a sense exercise. So I'm gonna say like you can start exercising if you feel comfortable like a day or two, and it's just really just like gentle movements, some rotational exercises, like maybe like some very gentle like cat-cow connection, and just like really just a little bit of mobility. That's really like the exercise that you're going to be doing within those first couple of weeks, and just like helping blood flow get to the areas that they need and to help healing and also prevent stiffness, pain, and also again like keep you able to take care of your newborn child and possibly other children, right? Like those gentle movements, and then eventually starting to work in like breath work with the pelvic floor and the core, and again learning how to reconnect to everything, because during pregnancy our body gets kind of extended, and our back is an extension, and ribs kind of get flared out, your pelvis is dipped forward, like it doesn't just naturally just pop back after baby goes. Like your body still thinks it's pregnant, at least in that sense of like your alignment and your posture. for, it could be like 3 weeks. So you got to teach it to be like, no, we don't have a baby anymore. We got to make sure everything shifts.
Right. And also, I think the other thing that's really, there's two things that came up to me when you were saying all that. First one is understanding that your body is still full of relaxin, which is a hormone that relaxes everything, which also means that you could really hurt yourself very easily if you overdo anything. So that's critically important. The other thing that you mentioned was like gentle stretching and stuff. And like immediately what came up for me is a breastfeeding mom. Because the number one thing that I have seen with postpartum women and is when they're breastfeeding is pain in the shoulders and back.
Yep.
Right. And so I just want to add this tip because I think it's critically important. I always tell my clients, baby to you, not you to baby.
Yes.
Right. Because so many people will put their newborn on a nursing pillow or whatever, and then they'll hunch over to reach the baby. And now they are just pulling everything. The weight of their breasts is pulling down on their back and their shoulders. And their shoulders within 2 or 3 days after having that baby will be in burning, excruciating pain. Right. And so I always say, not you to baby. You're not going to baby. You are sitting back and getting comfortable, relaxing those shoulders, leaning back, and then you're bringing the baby to you. And if that means a bunch more pillows, like do whatever you got to do, but that will help reduce that pain in the back and shoulders tremendously. And then I imagine, back and shoulders and, doing lots of this and those stretches would really help too. But that's probably the biggest tip that I tell people.
Yeah, mobility during those stages, like you said, especially for breastfeeding moms, is key. And the shoulders, upper back, upper neck, just everything to get you out of those hours and hours of time spent in that position, right? Like, so you have to balance it. Like if you spend, X amount of time in that breastfeeding position, like you got to make sure you're doing something to at least try to counteract it a little bit so that our muscles don't start to get like stuck in that position.
Yeah.
As far as knowing kind of when to start anything other than those gentle movements is really based on bleeding. So you really definitely want to wait until bleeding is very, very close to being done. Like a little bit of, brown is fine towards the end. And if it's very light, like then you can start to kind of add in maybe some gentle walks, slowly increasing the time for your walks. But at least everything that I've learned so far is like really like bleeding, like just wait.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's something I noticed even with myself postpartum is like I would get the feeling like, okay, I'm like ready. I want to go to the grocery store. Like I want to go, do something. And maybe that was like day 5 or 6 or something like that. And then like I paid for it, right? I paid for it. The bleeding would suddenly, I'd been like, maybe my bleeding had really tapered off. I was just spotting a little bit. And then if I went and overdid it physically, and that's just walking, that's just going to the store or something, my body would suddenly be like, now we've got fresh bleeding. And right then, like, oh, I probably overdid that. Unfortunately, a lot of people think, oh, there's something wrong, and they'll think they don't associate it with the fact that they did too much. Or even for some people, it's like, well, I need to get some of the housework done, right? I'm going to get the dishes done. I'm going to do all these things. And then at the end of the day, their body is just wrecked because they did too much. And it seems like I think a lot of people think, well, these are just basic things, like, right? Like, how could that be too much? But the body really
staying in bed for like 2 weeks and not leaving, other than the bathroom and baby stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there's a lot of misguidance for that too, and then kind of like leading up to the 6-week, right? The 6-week appointment. Everyone looks forward to it. I think unfortunately, and I personally went through this, I basically like I did some walking during my postpartum, and I thought that was really all I could do. And again, like my OB gave me like zero guidance. So I'm like, all right, like I guess I'll just do a little bit of stretching. I just kind of felt like, oh, like my hamstrings feel tight, or my back kind of feels tight. Like I didn't do anything that I would do now. And then it's basically like, unfortunately, a lot of women go from that like 0 to 100 at like 6 weeks. And yeah, maybe they've been doing like the general kind of housework here and there, but still that's not a foundation for you to just go back at 6 weeks and just to like go back to your normal strength routine or your HIIT class or cardio or go for a 5 mile run, right? Like, and doctors just don't give good guidance on that at all, and they don't give you any support tools or anything like that. So just to like put it in perspective as like not even a postpartum concept of just like general body healing, right? Like if you roll your ankle, okay, your body goes through like a process of healing. All right. So first couple of stages, like super inflammatory, all of the blood rushes to the area. That's usually bruising, just everything just looks ugly. Right. So that's roughly like 6 days. Right. Then it goes through like the repair phase. So now it's got to fix everything that's got damaged. So that's another phase, usually another like 10-ish days after that or so. Then it goes through the next phase, which can basically, depending on the severity of things, like can be up to like a year for everything to get repaired and healed and connecting the right way. And then, you add like any other kind of like remodeling. So that's strength training basically okay, so like now everything is connected and feels good, but it's weak. Now you got to strengthen it so that it doesn't get injured again. So like that whole process can like take like up to like a year to almost like 2 years. And that's just, for like normal kind of injuries. Like if someone has like an ACL injury and they have surgery, right? They take 12, it's like 9 to 12 months for recovery. And then usually at that 12-month mark, they're like, okay, I feel confident and comfortable running again. And yet when you have a baby, it's like, nah, you're good to go at 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Go for it, right? What are some of the things that you do encourage people to like add back in though? And when do you have like a specific thing, or is it real individual?
Yeah, it's really individual, because even like how long you push for makes a difference on your body. And again, like vaginal, cesarean, is this your first? Is this your second? Is this your fifth? Like, how active were you before pregnancy, or how active were you like during your pregnancy? There's just so many things. And, were there any other like complications? Any stitches? And again, like depending on what time they try to come back, like, is there any kind of prolapse? Are there any kind of signs of incontinence? Like, there's just so much to unpack that unfortunately doctors just don't look at.
Right.
And it goes, the scarier one, I think, is the 8-week for cesareans, is that with any kind of surgery, right, there's always a follow-up with physical therapy, or at least like the doctors say, like, hey, you need physical therapy before you start exercising. There's nothing with C-sections. There's no protocol to get back to exercising with major abdominal surgery.
Right. 7 layers that they're getting through.
Exactly.
Right?
There's no
layers of tissue and muscle and
they just look at it. They're like, oh yeah, like, scars look, it looks healed. Like, uterus, seems good. Like they do like a basic pelvic exam just to make sure things like look good. But like, do they test like the functionality of things? Do they test for your core strength? Like I took a poll, it was like a while back, but I took a poll on a couple of Facebook groups for moms, and I was like, do you remember at your 6 or 8 week appointment, did your doctor check you for diastasis? And like 85% of them said no.
No. Like, I had severe diastasis recti and I didn't know.
Yeah, which also contributes to back pain and everything else postpartum. But moms are just like, well, that's just a part of having a baby.
I think it comes to so many other things in prenatal, postpartum visits, it's like the doctor only has a certain amount of time. He or she has a protocol, and they're not trained in. I mean, think about it. Like, how many of us go to our pediatrician with all these appointments and then ask for breastfeeding advice, but our pediatricians don't have proper breastfeeding training?
Right.
Same kind of concept. Well, I doubt, and I'm sure there's exceptions out there, but I doubt an OB who sliced you open into the C-section has the proper training to diagnose or even ask the questions about some of these things, right? No one talks about pelvic floor therapy. No one talks about movement and stuff, they'll be the first to berate you and tell you that you gained too much weight or you're not, losing it fast enough or whatever, but there's no solution based there either. And that's, again, it takes a village, right? It's the whole reason for this podcast, because as a mom, not that it's our responsibility, but yeah, it's our responsibility to understand that doctor is not on the pedestal. He or she doesn't know every single thing, and that we have to do our own research. We have to, get into these communities, these spaces where we can be referred based on, hey, I'm having pain here, or something doesn't feel right to me in my gut and I need to seek additional help. Maybe the doctor's the first place you go, but not the end all be all. Sorry, I will get off my soapbox now.
No, and to kind of piggyback off of that too, like, again, what motivated me to go and get my certification was being a first-time mom. Like, I also didn't know what questions to ask. Like, they're always like, oh, what questions do you have? And I'm like, well, I don't really know, like, what to ask. And so I ended up having a grade 1-2 prolapse. And I was definitely feeling that at that 6-week appointment, but I literally didn't have the words to describe it. Like, I didn't think of like, oh, like I feel heaviness in my vagina, right? Like, I just was like, everything feels swollen down there. And she's like, no, like things look good. And I'm like, okay, like, I guess this is my body now. Like, is this what a postpartum body feels like? Like, I don't know.
Right. I think that's so critically important what you're saying, is that if you don't know what normal is, then you don't know that there's even something wrong, unless there's some very obvious thing that happens.
Mhm.
Right. But gosh, I could like go into my whole story, but I prolapsed everything with my last baby.
Mhm.
And ultimately it was because I pushed way too hard. I pushed way too hard, way too fast. He came out very fast, and he was nearly 10 pounds. And they were just like, go, 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 push, 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 right? And so, of course, I'm just like, and they're like, yeah, right? They're cheering me on. And I'm screaming because, excuse my French, but my asshole was quite literally tearing. And I was like, they're just telling me to go. And I'm screaming. And I'm like, okay, this must be okay. It must be normal. But I pushed with all of my might. And it was like considered this amazing thing, an amazing accomplishment, because I was pushing him out in 2 pushes. I was so proud. But little did I know that I prolapsed my bladder, I prolapsed my urethra, and I prolapsed my rectum. And I had to have full reconstructive surgery a year later. But it took me like a year. I mean, sooner than a year. I knew my bladder was prolapsed because that was very obvious, because I could not hold my bladder. I couldn't hold my urine. But even more than that, I kept saying, I have this pressure. There's this pressure. Like, I can't sit on my knees anymore, like sit back on my haunches, and like I was trying to do yoga and I just couldn't. This was at like 12 weeks postpartum. Well, but I couldn't describe it. And they kept looking, and like everything to them was fine. Well, it turned out I had a piece of my placenta was stuck in my cervical os, like it was stuck in there. And it was every time I would sit down or like go back on my haunches, this bulging piece of tissue would try to come out of my cervix, but it was closed. And then finally, I'm guessing when I was probably starting to get maybe a cycle or something. And so then my cervix opened a little bit and came out this huge chunk of tissue. So, and I, by the way, was a doula for 15 years. I was a birth professional. And I still didn't know what the hell was going on. Right. And then it wasn't until and I didn't know my rectum was prolapsed. I just kept having issues with going to the bathroom, and I just didn't understand. I didn't know what it was. And I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't until, probably, I'm not going to tell the rest because it's just too much detail. but finally I said, I'm having to stick my thumb inside in order to get my stool to pass. That was what finally I was able to 9 months later. And then they checked and they were like, oh gosh, your rectum is prolapsed. Right? And then you're just but if I didn't keep advocating for myself and trying to find the words and trying to find out the information, God only knows what would have happened. I certainly wasn't able to leave that up to the professionals. I had to finally figure it out, and I had to just keep finding the words. And there was nobody who was asking me the right questions.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, obviously that's not really about exercise necessarily, but it made, I could not do exercise.
Yeah.
Because my pelvic floor everything just felt like it was going to fall out all the time. And I was scared.
Yeah.
Right. And this is somebody, again, I was a birth professional. I know more than the average person, and I still had no idea what questions I should be asking, what was normal, what wasn't. This was my first vaginal birth, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big testament to what you said, Jordan. It's so individualized, and Google can help you, but Google's very general, right? Use the G's as that, remembering tool, but no one is going to substitute your personal care. And even that doctor is, how many physicians have a huge practice and they don't really know your personal story. Maybe it's in your charts, maybe it's not, but having a doula, having a lactation consultant, having a personal trainer that specializes in postpartum fitness when you are in that postpartum period, those are the people that we need to start normalizing to go to for these things. Mm-hmm. And it's about, we talk about this all the time, and it leads up to our last question, but about the village and how crucial it is to surround yourself with the right people when you're in your perinatal period, and whether you're in your first or your fourth, you said, Dawn, this happened with your last baby. So it's necessary every time. It's not, hey, I had a baby, I know what to expect now, let me just do it myself, Yeah.
I think that's true. Going to a pelvic floor specialist, that's what they do. It's just and then I say, if you're talking about wanting to get back into a physical routine, right, of prenatal or postpartum exercise, talk to somebody who knows this stuff, not just some random, like you said, your initial certification. It didn't really provide you with what you needed. And it's we talk about pediatricians and how unless they go get additional lactation training, they only got the very basics. Obstetricians, their thing on nutrition for pregnancy, 2 pages in their medical, usually 1 to 2 days is spent on nutrition in pregnancy while they're in medical school.
Yeah.
Like,
I want to just put a disclaimer out there. Like, obviously, we're all not millionaires and there's a lot of cost associated to all of these things. But I will tell you, and that's one of the reasons that the Perinatal Resource Collaborative exists. And we're a collective of perinatal professionals creating these resources for free, like this podcast, like our magazine, and different things. Because, yes, you won't necessarily get the individualized, questions answered or care, but at least the awareness and some education around it that helps you navigate. Okay, well, where do my dollars need to go? What is my biggest priority right now? And where can I put those dollars? Because yes, I understand this is not us preaching, hey, you need to have a lactation consultant, a doula, a personal trainer, a personal dietitian, cooking your postpartum meals, like all of the things. But what is the most crucial for you? And how can you help navigate, how can you navigate it? How can you gain the information from these free resources? And I know, Jordan, I know you do, like your content is great on, Instagram and things like that, just with like simple things. So if you have a question here and there, yeah, maybe you don't have to hire a full-on personal trainer, but if fitness is important to you or you're in pain and discomfort, then okay, this is the avenue I need to go. So yeah, I just want to put that out there because listeners, I don't want you guys to assume that, we have all this money and we bought the village essentially, like, right? This is called speaking of the village, not like we're going to buy the village.
Yeah. We're going to hire the whole village.
Hire the village. But, and also, so many of these women who are in these roles we've talked about this before, like are in these roles because of a labor of love. Like they don't get into, you don't get into doulaing or lactation support or postpartum, fitness until you're a mom yourself or until you have an experience yourself. So there's compassion there, there's empathy there. If it's a simple guidance or a tool or something that can support you, just reach out. We can connect you with someone, look in your circle of friends to see if they maybe have some. There's absolutely opportunity for you to get supported. Don't stay silent, right? In any capacity of your perinatal journey.
And to piggyback off of that real quick, Nicole, I know we're going to try to finish up soon, but I love the fact that you said, like, what do I need to prioritize now? And just to emphasize, as a postpartum personal trainer, like, it's also never too late, right? Like, yes, you might have not received the postpartum care that you needed. Yes, you might still be dealing with diastasis a year out and like back pain and all pregnancy or birth related issues that are happening. But that doesn't mean, like, just because you're a year and a half or 2 years or even 5 years, that doesn't mean like a postpartum personal trainer can't help you. Like, I think what I've been coming into contact with a lot of, with just women in general, are saying like, like, like my kids are 6 and 7 years old. Like, postpartum, like I'm not postpartum anymore. And it's, in a sense, you are, right? Your body
always postpartum.
It's not
forever.
But that doesn't mean like I'm gonna be having you do like these basic postpartum recovery exercises. But maybe we do need to do some foundational stuff, but also some other strength training things to like help address those problems. And again, I think like it's never too late.
I love that. No, because, and listen, again, personal, story here. I reached out to Jordan because I personally am like, okay, this was a couple weeks ago. It was before the holidays. And I was like, I don't want to wait till January 1st. Like, I need to start changing. I just don't feel good. I need more energy. Like, she was my go-to person. Yeah, I could have just got a gym membership at Planet Fitness and tried to figure it out myself. But I was like, let me go to her. I know she's amazing. I know she's in my community. And let's have a conversation. And like, I'll be the first to admit, it's January 20th when we are recording this, and I have not done one planned exercise since we started talking. But my whole world literally, like everything happens every single week. But I've done some squats and I've done some dance parties.
You meal prepped.
I meal prepped. Like,
that was fun.
Thank God I meal prepped last week because my entire house was puking every 30 minutes for days on end. So I would not have been able to eat if it wasn't already done. There was a reason I got it done last week.
Yep.
But little progress, like little victories. And like, again, someone like Jordan, who is a mom, she understands. She's not going to be like, you didn't do what you needed to do. It was like, okay, how can we shift? How can we adjust? How can we just get little things going? So like this morning I did 10 body weight squats with the baby in my arms because like, you know, we're just like playing with each other and I was like, oh, I'm going to pick you up and do this, you know?
Oh my gosh.
So,
There's so many, gosh, I wish we could have got into that. There's so many things you could do that are exercises that, you know, include the baby,
well,
right? And it's fun engagement.
I think we definitely need to do a part 2 of this because of one, I want to get into the bounce back culture and how we can like squash that BS.
Yeah.
And then also, yeah, like let's do a whole like bouncing baby instead of bouncing back kind of episode.
I love that.
So let me ask just to end this up. Wrap this up. There we go.
Yeah.
Just to wrap this up. Speaking of the village, who besides a prenatal and postpartum personal trainer would you say is the most crucial and valuable person in someone's village?
I think having a perinatal professional that actually understands you and understands your situation, and you've gotten to know them in a sense, like that it could be almost anyone, you know, just someone that you have a deep connection with, that either a pelvic or physical therapist, either a doula, either a midwife, just someone that you have connected with. I think that makes a huge difference. And I personally, like, that was what made a huge difference for me, was the physical therapist that I finally found. And I went through a few. And the one that I found, I was like, oh my God, like she hears me. She understands me. And it was also helpful that she was a mom too. So she understood, like, okay, I didn't get my exercises done, but here's some other things that I can do to kind of tweak it and still work on it. And it's just that specifically perinatal professional, I think, that can also give you other resources, right? If they can hear you and understand like your issues and being like, okay, I can, you know, ask this person this question and this person that question, just finding that professional that actually understands you and values you.
You are literally speaking to what Birthify is, which is, you know, my other business. That's exactly what it is. In fact, I know we're supposed to be ending, but I just need to say this because this really was, we originally had the concept of having all these different providers on our platform so that people could get everything in one place.
Mm-hmm.
But we realized that most people just want a single person that they can talk to who understands the basics of everything, of all of these things, prenatal and postpartum, that then can send them out resources for greater information, but that they had somebody who was consistently with them every week. I mean, when we did our beta test, it was off the charts. People were like, that was what I needed. And we had one of our guests too talked about this, about how many times people, what they're looking for, they think they're looking for information, but what they're really looking for is support.
Right.
And that they frequently keep going to the internet to find that support and they can't find it because the internet is information,
right,
and not support. And so anyways, you just spoke to my heart. You know, I mean, it's exactly what I'm so passionate about, is that, you know, having somebody to talk to, even as a birth professional, that would have done me a million times. I mean, it just would have been so amazing if I would have talked to somebody every week who had perinatal experience like that, and on a regular basis, and said, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. My guess is they'd be like, ding, ding, you've got something going on here. We need to here's people. Here's pelvic floor. Here's all the things.
Yeah. And here's the question.
My perinatal resource collaborative to come hurt you.
Yeah. I mean, it's what we're living for, right? It's the reality is, it is the name of this podcast. Speaking of the village, we need a village. We need to be in community. We need to be talking to each other. We need to be supporting each other as women, as pregnant folks, whatever you want to call it, as just people that are navigating parenthood, period.
Yeah.
And like this, I mean, and here we are, just keep trying to create the resources for it because we know it's so desperately needed. So if you are looking for this and this sounds like the best thing for you possible, check out Birthify, please. If you're pregnant or in your first few weeks postpartum, we can help you. You can check out the Prenatal Resource Collaborative. And I'm sure Mama Muscle Fitness or Muscle Mama Fitness, we'll have all of your stuff in the show notes. And you know, we're here for you. You don't have to be doing this alone, and you're not supposed to be.
Nope.
And yeah, so
all right. Well, thank you, Jordan, so much for this conversation. It definitely lit me up. I'm gonna go do some squats. So.
Thank you. This was awesome. So it's just so great to connect to other women that also get it.
thank
All
you.
right. We'll talk soon.